The SEC pulled off a full sweep of the ACC.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Kalia Butler. Joined alongside me is Sophia Jones. Happy Friday, everyone. Friday fun day. Hopefully you have some interesting plans for the weekend. I know I personally don't. But before you get into the weekend, we have to talk about this SEC ACC showdown that we spoke about. I was correct in my open of yesterday, not even last week, yesterday, that the SEC was going to take over the ACC. And I say that with a hurt heart because I did go to an ACC school. So don't attack me on that. We're going to go over all the games that we saw last night. But before we get into that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Okay. First one we're getting into is LSU versus Duke. LSU, who is ranked 5th right now, came away with a win 93-77. However, I think of the past couple of games that we've seen from Duke, this seemed to be a game that they were in a little bit more significantly from the start and for a little while until LSU started to pull away a little bit, but probably one of the stronger starts from Duke that we've seen out of their past couple of games.
Definitely. It wasn't until the end of the third quarter and in the fourth quarter that LSU really started to pull away. But especially when you talk about that first quarter and those first couple of minutes, Duke really was the one that punched first. And LSU, credit to them, they responded exactly like they should have. But just to your point, I think with Duke, you can tell that they're slowly starting to turn the quarter a little bit. They were hitting a lot of their shots and getting great, just wide open looks, pressuring LSU so they could play in the open court on the other end and then make miss. They were just pushing pace. And I think that is what really helped to open things up for them. But where you saw the shift and where I think LSU started to get in a little bit more control of the game and get themselves back in is when Toby Fournier had to sit in that first quarter because she picked up her first foul. This is something that Kara Lawson has done all season just to make sure that Fournier doesn't continue to stack up anymore because you get 5 in women's college basketball till you foul out. And then you have Malaysia Fulwiley checking in for LSU. Malaysia Fulwiley was the ultimate spark of offense and defense off the bench. She really just did her thing, was such a great slasher getting to the paint and the rim. And then on defense, she was putting so much pressure in the backcourt that it really sped Duke up overall as a team. And I think that LSU does not win this game definitely without Malaysia Fulwiley.
When Malaysia Fulwiley checked in, it's like, that NBA meme of, I believe it's or James Harden at the free throw line. Or
I think it's LeBron.
LeBron's at the free throw line. Harden is coming in, or was it Kawhi? Why am I confused? Kawhi's coming in. LeBron James is at the free throw line, and he looks over and he's like, that's exactly what it's like to have Malaysia Fulwiley check in when your top player is currently on the bench, so she doesn't get into any further foul trouble. But when we're talking about Malaysia Fulwiley's performance for LSU, she had 16 points. You talk about her defense. She only had 1 steal, but on the stat sheet, I don't think it shows just how much pressure she was really applying on Duke defensively. She also had 5 rebounds with 6 of 13 from the field, made all her free throws that night. Another standout was obviously Flau'jae Johnson, 18 points. She had a block in the game, a rebound, and was 7 from 11 from the field, 3 of 4 from 3-point range. But they had a very balanced attack. Michaela Williams stepped in with 14 points. Amaya Joyner had 14 points as well. And then Kate Koval also 13 points. And then Grace Knox had 12 points. A very balanced attack from this LSU team. And I think that's what's so difficult. And something that I had mentioned in yesterday's episode where when you have a balanced attack like this going up against Duke defensively, who is a very strong defensive team, but if you can keep showing them multiple forms of attack essentially and have a balanced offense, it can throw them off their rhythm. And I think that is what we saw from LSU.
Definitely. It was very much an inside out game, maybe a little bit more emphasis on finishing inside as opposed to high volume from the perimeter. But they were putting Duke in a lot of pick and roll actions on the perimeter, wings specifically, so they could get downhill. And it forced a lot of emergency switches on Duke's part, which LSU then just totally took advantage of. If a big was switched onto a guard, they exploited that matchup, and we saw multiple instances of Malaysia Fulwiley or Flau'jae Johnson just getting their bag, going to work. And then if it was a guard that was switched onto a big, they did a great job of feeding it down low with some amazing post-entry passes. So, but that emergency switch doesn't happen if you aren't aggressive and you aren't balanced and just scoring at such a high level like LSU is right now.
For the Duke side, some standout players: Ashlyn Jackson, 16 points, three rebounds, 5 of 14 from the field. Taina Marr, 14 points. Toby Fournier, 14 points. Delaney Thomas, 12 points. Ariana Robertson, 11 points. And Riley Nelson, 10 points. So Duke also having a pretty balanced scoring attack too. I think where we saw Duke kind of perform best, as what you mentioned, is when they were getting out and playing fast. They had 16 fast break points and 23 points off of turnovers. We spoke a lot about how their defense kind of fuels what they're going to look like on the offensive end, but they just weren't able to carry that out especially in the second half.
Definitely not. And you say getting those stops on the defensive end fuels their offense. Well, once LSU started to get into that more comfortable of a rhythm, you could see Duke trying to push pace, even though it was a make basket sometimes. But once they get into their half-court offense, it can just become very stagnant sometimes. Their transition offense was perfect, but like I said, some of those sets aren't executed to the highest level that they could be. But especially when you look at those first 5 minutes compared to the rest of the game for Duke, they were getting a lot of the same shots that they were in those first 5 minutes. They just weren't connecting. And I think it's because LSU was really trying to speed them up and be more physical. And just that little push can force a team to be that much more hesitant and indecisive in their actions. And I think that's what Duke fell victim to.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at the big picture for both these teams, LSU, their 100-point scoring streak ends. However, obviously, they just got to win against a Power 4 opponent. So, you can even those things out. They're looking to be trending upward as well. I think you're seeing their defensive identity grow alongside the offensive identity they already have, and having Malaysia Fulwiley on this team and just the energy that she brings and the offensive scoring and defensive pressure. Very happy. You have to be very happy that she decided to transfer to your school. As for Duke, they put up a good fight against LSU. We've talked about this before. They have a lot of room to grow still, but when we're looking at how wide open the ACC is right now on who can be a top contender in finishing number 1 in the ACC, they still definitely have a good opportunity at doing so.
Definitely. And just to piggyback off of that point for Duke, you just want to be playing your best basketball when it gets to conference, and then after that, when it gets to March. And Duke, I think they're still on an upward trajectory to where they could reach that. But I'll also throw in that Elena Beard was in attendance at the game with Adam Silver. Beard is the Project B chief basketball officer and a Duke alumni. And Adam Silver, very closely tied with the WNBA. So I imagine they're doing a little bit of scouting for their own individual leagues, but I found it interesting that they were both together there.
Yeah, maybe they're more of a forward unit than we think they are. Maybe they can give us some updates on what's going on in the CBA and Project B. But coming up next, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into what we saw from this ACC SEC challenge. The season's heating up, and DoorDash has a way to keep their fans in their bag the whole way through. Whether you're watching the highlights, the tunnel fits, or just your favorite player, DoorDash makes the entire season more fun because every player has their bag with DoorDash. Fans have one too. DoorDash keeps your snacks stocked, your gear fresh, and your watch party vibes absolutely on point. There are nights where your team stresses you out. Let DoorDash become your post-game therapy. Sometimes you just need dessert now. From tip-off to overtime, stay in your bag and order on DoorDash. Get snacks, drinks, gear, whatever gets you through the season, delivered right to your door. DoorDash, in your bag all season long. Next up on our ACC SEC Challenge, South Carolina, who is ranked 3rd in the polls right now, defeats Louisville 79-77. Louisville ranked 22. They were playing at the KFC Yum Center. I think what was maybe most surprising about this game was the score. Louisville is a great opponent, but when we're thinking of South Carolina has been a team for so many years that seems almost untouchable in a way. I think as of late, we did see South Carolina lose to Texas, obviously, coming away with only 2 points in a win over Louisville. That very much could have been a loss if that 3 was made at the very end of the game. But Louisville, South Carolina is a team then that can be defeated. And I think, not to get into big picture just yet before we get into the game breakdown, but they might struggle a little bit when it comes to SEC play this season.
I would agree, especially when you think of how physical and athletic pretty much every single team in the SEC is. And South Carolina, they haven't really imposed their will like we're used to seeing in the past. I mean, they've turned basketball games into track meets before and haven't gotten too much of a glimpse of that, at least against another ranked opponent this season. But there were certain times where I was shocked at the amount of defensive miscommunications and breakdowns that South Carolina was having for Louisville, especially in that second half. There would be some times where they were driving to the rim and they were just going like straight line drive to the rim, maybe off of a little bit of a pick and roll action, but it's like the seas were opening up for them to get all the way down into the paint. And that's not usually the South Carolina that we're used to seeing with how dominant they can be in the interior. Although I will give a lot of credit because they closed the first half out strong, then Louisville came back in that second half. It felt like Louisville were more so the aggressors in that latter half. However, when it mattered most and down the stretch, South Carolina just always had the poised answer offensively. They got to the paint to finish at the rim, or they got it to Medina Caught. But I think just that poise and composure, especially from a team that is led by a couple of veterans in the backcourt, that is really what held them down this game.
Yeah, and we've spoke about this before, and I think it was really noticeable within the Texas game, is in the second half, it doesn't seem like South Carolina is coming out with the same energy and consistency as they have had in the first half, and that's where the games start to get away from them a little bit. They do a great job at keeping themselves in the game, but you mentioned it just seems like some lapses at certain points where you're having defensive breakdowns, even offensively at times. I do think there could be a little bit more floor leadership to get them into their offensive flow, because sometimes it just seems like a little bit of a make it, take it. Whoever is going to get the ball is just going to drive, see what they can do. It doesn't seem like they're in rhythm with each other just yet. Not to say that can't happen sometime soon, but I also believe that it's due to a certain lack of depth for the South Carolina team right now too. And I think where that stood out most was the bench points. For Louisville, they had 34 bench points who they've been able to go pretty deep into their bench so far this season. For South Carolina, they only had 4 bench points the entirety of the game. That is a lot of pressure on your starters to be able to be full throttle an entire essentially 40 minutes. And when you're looking at the breakdown of that starting lineup, essentially Medina Okot, 33 minutes, Tessa Johnson, 38 minutes, Joyce Edwards, 36 minutes, Raven Johnson, 38 minutes, Tania Latson, 38 minutes. That is a lot of basketball to be played when you're only this early on in the season. Once you get into SEC play and you talk about that physicality, the players are bigger. They like to run and push pace. If you're having all your top players play for a minimum of 30 plus minutes every single game and you can't rely heavily on your bench to get it done, it's going to start draining this South Carolina team eventually.
Yeah, and we really hope it doesn't get to that point. And it was, or yesterday, because they also didn't have Agut Makir, who she usually provides a huge spark off the bench and just an important contributing piece from there for South Carolina. But they just have no one that they can really bring in that also keeps that same kind of energy like that starting 5. And it's a very, very, very high bar to compete against and compete with. So giving the credit to that starting 5 where it's due. However, like you mentioned, just down the stretch and down the line when it comes to SEC play, how are they going to handle a little bit of a lack of depth?
Yeah. I know right now South Carolina has to be missing Malaysia Fuwaili a little bit, especially when we're seeing just the intensity that she is bringing to LSU. So depth might play a part for South Carolina eventually. However, they still did win this game. Medina Okot had 23 points, 13 rebounds, so a double-double on the night. Tessa Johnson, another leading scorer for this South Carolina team, had 20 points, 7 rebounds, was 4 of 7 from 3, 7 of 13 from the field. Joyce Edwards chipping in with 12 points, 5 rebounds. Raven Johnson, 11 points, 4 rebounds, and Tania Latson with 9 points. So as you can see, it was a little bit of kind of an inside-out game for them too, between Tessa Johnson and Medina Okot. Joyce Edwards still having a solid game, but we have seen obviously South Carolina rely on their front court a little bit more heavily than some of their guard play.
Yeah, but you know what? Shout out to Joyce Edwards for making her first career college 3 in that game, because you start to open that up, we could be looking at a very, very different South Carolina.
Absolutely. She was 1 of 1 for threes. So it's kind of, I think I love most about South Carolina is seeing some of their bigs score from 3, especially obviously I'm going to think of Camila Cardoso. No, I think everybody's going to remember the 3 that she won to finish the game. And I remember she has the same facial reaction every time, even with the sky. It was literally like 2 seconds left on the shot clock. She had the ball and she was at the 3-point line. Everyone just shoot it. Like, you've got it. And she shot it and made it. And I think she like banked it in again too. And her face is always just like, did I do that? And it's so funny. So yes, love seeing South Carolina bigs getting the credit that they deserve. Really quick, just for Louisville, top player was Tahiana Roberts with 20 points. She was 4 from 8 from 3 and 8 of 18 from the field. She had 4 rebounds and 3 assists.
She was fantastic for Louisville. She had really great decision making in her shot selection. That last sideline out of bounds play was drawn up for her. She was wide open coming off. When she shot it and put it in the air, I thought Louisville was about to get this game, but it just rimmed out. But she put up a really great performance, and I think she really contributed to the fact that Louisville were the aggressors in that second half and were able to get back into the game and really challenge South Carolina.
Yeah, South Carolina coming away with a solid win, preparing for their next one. And Louisville having to be pretty happy with their performance against the South Carolina team. Will look really good in the ACC this season. But coming up, we still got more ACC and SEC teams to talk about.
NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. One of their current lines is that the South Carolina women's basketball team has minus 125 odds to win the SEC regular season championship. So still looking pretty good for the Gamecocks. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
Okay, some other games that happened yesterday to make note of. Ole Miss taking on Notre Dame. They defeated Notre Dame 69-62. Also, Texas taking over North Carolina in a 79-64 win. We'll start with Ole Miss and Notre Dame. Obviously, all eyes were on Hannah Hidalgo, who is their leading scorer, averaging 27 points a game right now. How did Ole Miss contain her?
And I like that you use the word contain, because Hannah Hidalgo had 18 points in the first half, a lot of those just in the first quarter, but they're just the one-on-one defender. They're defending her well, and then they're just guiding her right into some help. So weak side, they're coming. A strong side, they're playing heavily in the gap. So when Hannah drives, she has about 3 players with all their attention on her, and they're just trying to force her to either kick it out or shoot a heavily contested shot, which is a lot more of what we saw in that second half, which for Notre Dame, when you slow Hidalgo down, the Notre Dame team slows down. And that is essentially how Ole Miss was able to get themselves back into the game, because Notre Dame led by as many as 19 in that first half. So they really had a great comeback and then just took control, especially in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, it's hard because, I was trying to find a word for Ole Miss's defense, because I think they did really well defensively against Hannah Hidalgo, but I say that and she still had 28 points. So it's hard to find that balance. She had 28 points and 5 steals, but you are exactly right. When it comes to, if you slow down Hannah Hidalgo a little bit, or at least make her a little less of a threat. Again, she had 28 points, but it does slow down essentially the energy of the rest of this Notre Dame team. And I mean, she was leading in scoring by a significant margin. The only other player that had double digits for Notre Dame was Malaya Cowles, who had 12 points with 6 of 9 from the field. And then you have Vanessa De Jesus, who came in with 7 points, as well as Gisela Sanchez, who had 9 points. But if you're thinking of Hannah Hidalgo's 28-point performance, it's a little bit difficult in comparison. A team also that doesn't shoot many threes, as we saw out of the entire team, they were 2 of 7. Hannah Hidalgo didn't make any threes in that game. Again, still had a 28-point performance, but for Ole Miss, exactly the player that we were talking about with Cotty McCone, who had 22 points. It was 2 of 6 from 3-point range, 10 of 20 from the field. She had a really great performance, and somebody that we said you have to look out for on Ole Miss.
And she is just such a tough cookie. There was one point in the third quarter where she had to come out just to get attended by the athletic training staff after a little bit of a yucky fall, but she came back in and immediately made a difference. For someone who is so powerful and strong as she is, she also can finish very softly around the rim, which I think is a tremendous asset when you consider how well that quick first step just gets by defenders. But McMahon just really she did her thing for that Ole Miss team. But in comparison to Notre Dame, when McMahon came out, it was that balance and that supporting cast that also really held it down for the Rebels. That is where you see the bit of the disparity compared to Notre Dame.
Absolutely. For the other game of the day, which was our leading game yesterday that we spoke about. Texas, again, walking away with a win, 79 over North Carolina, who had 64. We'll talk about some standout performances from Texas. Madison Booker, 18 points and 6 rebounds. Jordan Lee, 22 points on the day, 2 of 5 from 3, 10 of 16 from the field, as well as 5 rebounds.
Yeah, those players are just, Texas has such great hoopers. And what I think is so efficient about Vic Schaefer's system is that he puts players into that offensive scheme that he knows their strengths will be on display. I think automatically of Madison Booker's mid-range. And so what do? She's coming off all of these curls and pin downs and just away action so that she can stop and pop, not even have to take any dribble. It's like the Klay Thompson 60 points, 11 dribbles game. I wouldn't be surprised if Madison Booker can put up numbers like that at some point without even having to dribble the ball. But just Texas, they're so steady in their offense and defense, and they really wore down UNC with their physicality and again, that mechanical offense. But Jordan Lee has really come in and made a name for herself at a time where Texas is down on numbers a little bit. She played all 40 minutes of the game. So extreme credit for her to be efficient, especially when she's been having or playing a lot of minutes that she has recently.
Yes. And for North Carolina, we're able to keep it close for some time, especially in that first and fourth quarter. But it was kind of those middle ones that hurt them a little bit in this game.
Yeah. And that's where I just say with Texas, really, they just need a sliver of a gap to open up the game. And for UNC, if you go into an offensive drought, which Texas does a great job of forcing you into because of their physical defense, that's just where the game starts to open up. But for US, it was that second quarter, especially where Texas outscored UNC 23-10. I mean, that's essentially the game right there. But UNC still gave a lot of fight. And I think you could see why they're ranked number 11 right now still.
Absolutely. A good win for Texas, though, who keeps climbing up in the rankings. They're getting awfully close to UConn. And if they keep walking away with some of these wins, you never know. But that'll do it for us this week. Thank you so much for watching Locked On Women's Basketball. We will see you guys again on